Welcome to Working with the Twitter API using Postman webinar. I'm pretty excited to talk about the Twitter API and how it can work with Postman. I'm really stoked to have a couple of people from actual Twitter Labs here joining me to talk about their end of the API, as well as I can talk a little bit about mine. So first, let's kick it off. My name's Ken Lane. I'm the Chief Evangelist here at Postman. My role is to help tell stories and get people excited about everything Postman and everything API. Also, we'll be hearing from Daniele Bernardi, who is Senior Partner Engineer with Twitter Labs, and his partner in crime, Suhem, Parack, who is the Senior Developer Advocate there at Twitter Labs. So I have to admit, we were all prepared to do this, and we were going through all the technical runs yesterday, and we're unable to have them live as part of this webinar. So what I did is I recorded it with them previously, and then I'll be playing the video portion for their part of the webinar. Sorry we couldn't make it happen, but this hopefully is the first of many that will be in the future about Twitter Labs and the new version 2 of their API. So let's go ahead and get started. Here's what we're going to cover today. So we're going to dive into how I was using version 1 of the Twitter API as part of the Postman COVID-19 response, and then how I got introduced to version 2. And then after I go through version 2 and kind of some of the learnings there, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Daniele to actually take us through all of that and kind of show you what I've been learning over the last couple months working with their team. And they're going to give us insight into some of the NLP and that context annotations that they've been working on, some pretty cool stuff. So all of this really began in March as the world kind of was shutting down. Everyone at Postman was really looking for something that they could do to push back on COVID-19. You know, in this time, we all kind of feel helpless, and as technologists, these are the skills we have. So we wanted folks to jump in and help in some way, and we just started looking for different ways. And when it comes to me, I always start with Twitter, and so leading this effort, that's where I went, is I wanted to actually dive into the Twitter API and understand how we can get more information about that. So let's go ahead and just get out of the deck here. And I just want to note, my partners on the chat here are saying, if you want to ask questions throughout this, we're going to have Q&A at the end. So go ahead and just feel free to ask questions, and they're going to be helping organize and sort them for me. And I'll dive in at the end of this. So let's jump out of the deck here. So all of this began as part of our here's the COVID-19 response page. And so you can come here and you can see a whole bunch of different Postman collections here that'll help you get up and going with different APIs. But we've been at this for about 2 months now, and the community's really jumped in and helped deliver a lot of these collections. But if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see how the origins of it, where we started. And it was really with a handful of Postman collections that allow you to pull information from the Twitter API. So let's go ahead and go into Postman, and we can kind of unpack our COVID-19 response journey here. So I want to back up because this is Twitter, and I think Twitter is one of those APIs that I feel non-developers as well as developers should know about and have some awareness of. And that's the purpose of this webinar, is to help open up developers' eyes to version 2 of the Twitter API, but also hopefully open up a wider audience's eyes to the potential of the Twitter API, because you can work with it without actually writing any code using Postman. So what is Postman? You should be seeing my Postman desktop now. Postman is a desktop application, but it is increasingly moving to the web. So a lot of the features that you find in here are also available via Postman's web platform. But this is the desktop client for working with APIs. And you should think of Postman much like a browser. It's just an industrial grade browser, and it's going to show you a little bit more of what's going on behind the scenes when you make each call on the web or to APIs. And so Postman, when I got started with the Twitter API, I started here with COVID-19 searches. So this is a collection. I'm on the left-hand side here. I'm going to go ahead and pin this to the top so we can kind of focus on it. Helps us focus when it's pinned to the top and prominent in the listing. So this is an individual request. If I click on this tweet search COVID-19, it pulls up a tab, much like it would in a browser. We have a URL, much like we do in the browser, but then we have a whole bunch of other controls that we can use to craft and change that request. In your browser, you're pretty much limited to a link, whatever you can click on, and then the web page shows for you. In the API world, it works the same because APIs are just the web, but Postman gives you all of these knobs and dials that you can turn to understand what's going on behind the scenes. And so this is a Twitter 1.1 search. It allows me to search, add a query parameter, and say how many I want to get back. Now, the important part with APIs is you have to authenticate with them. They're not just public. Some are publicly available, but most, like the Twitter API, have an authentication layer. It's just like when you log into Facebook or log into Twitter, but you have to do that via Postman. And so to be able to get your authentication credentials, you have to go to your Twitter account and set that up. I'm not going to go into too much detail about that, but you can find, if you go to community.postman.com, there's a page on Twitter 1.1 authorization, and it'll walk you through all those steps if you need help doing that, how to set up that application. But for today, we're going to assume we have our tokens and our keys, and then we're going to put those in our environment. If you're not familiar with what an environment is, it's a companion up here in the top corner of Postman that you can store your keys and tokens in, so you don't have to put them into your collections, into your individual requests that you're storing as part of each collection. So I have a couple that I'll show you to view because I don't have my tokens in here, but when you set up an application in Twitter, you get back 4 tokens, and you just put those values in here and you hit update, and you'll be able to use one of these collections. And so I've got my own here with my credentials in it, and I can hit send, and I get back a JSON listing of all of the tweets for COVID-19. So that was kind of ground zero for what we did. Is I created 5 or 6 basic searches that would allow anyone to pull this data and run this collection here manually, like I just did in Postman, or you can run it with a runner, which will run all of them in a certain order, or you could set it up on a schedule and run it as a monitor. Click on create new up here in the top corner, and you can set up a monitor that will run this collection using your environment credentials and pull that JSON data down so that you can store that, do anything you want with it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. So as I was building this, I said, okay, great, I got some searches. What can we do next? And I got to work on identifying the state health departments for each of the 50 states in the United States. So we have California, we have Alabama, have Colorado, and these are just, all it does is instead of searching for tweets, I'm pulling that user's timeline via the API. And I'm able to just get a listing from Alabama Public Health. Oops, I got something wrong in the script. We'll talk about that in a bit. But this is all of Alabama Public Health's tweets. Now I can save those responses. I can do things with them, and we'll talk a little bit more about how you can do that in a bit. So I'm working on that. I dove into county health departments because every state has many counties, and each county has its own health department. So I found all the Twitter accounts for the different counties. You can look at California here. Here's all of the individual accounts. So now someone can run this entire collection. You can run it as a runner. You can run it as a monitor and pull all of the tweets from all of those accounts and aggregate them and use them as part of research or use them in some sort of response way. And that was kind of, again, just looking for ways that we could contribute that are API driven, that are Postman focused, that we can help people make sense of what is going on with COVID-19. And so we tweeted all that out, and we're asking community, what else can we build? And then Daniele from Twitter tweets at me and says, hey, this is awesome, great work, but did you know about the V2 API? And so I have to pause a moment. I'm a big fan of the Twitter API. I've used it since day one, since it was first launched. I pretty much consider myself an expert on the Twitter API, but I was unaware of the V2. And so this is a common community problem, cutting through the noise and letting your developer community know what's going on. I think I knew that the API was out there. I just never kicked the tires on it. I'd seen Twitter Labs. I didn't really think much too deeply about what they were up to. And so I dove into the documentation. You can go to their landing page at Twitter Labs. You can find all the documentation here, and you can sign up and get access to each of these APIs, and you can provide feedback on them. And these APIs become the next generation of APIs. So if it's kind of like voting, as I see it, is you can't complain about government if you don't vote. You can't complain about the Twitter API if you don't give back feedback as part of the process. That's how I feel about myself personally. And honestly, I'm a little embarrassed that I didn't know about it. So I dove into the Twitter API version 2 in the labs, and I got started with authentication. And the authentication is much easier. Version 1 is OAuth 1A, which requires 4 tokens and has some other quirks that you have to learn. Version 2 is using OAuth 2. It's up to par with the standards for most APIs. And I'm not going to run this because it'll pull and show a live token. But when I do run it, I have a script on this particular request. So I'm authorized, but I have a script. It's going to pull the token that gets returned, and it's going to save that here in my environment. But I have to switch to my V2 environment. So it's going to actually put this token up here and allow me then to use that token from this environment across many of my collections. So I have this collection down here. That's my V2 searches. I'm going to go ahead and pin that up to the top. Now I can make requests with this because I have that bearer token. Whoops, and I just quickly showed it to you there. It puts your bearer token in here for each individual request that's going to be made. Now, what's notable about the Twitter V2 is I have similar fields, like I have my query, my ability to query for COVID-19. I can tell it how many results I want back, just like V1. Then you have a wealth of other fields that you can use to dial in your search. And not just dial in your search and say when, tweets between a certain start time and an end time. You can actually customize the results you get back. So I'm actually saying I only want created at, author ID, the language, and context annotation. You can choose to have more places, location related fields. You can have media related fields showing images and videos and other media. So it gives you all of this. You can turn on, turn off, you can change the values, and you can really shape the request into what you are needing. And so when you hit send on this, you can see the response down here is tailored to exactly what I'm looking. I'm getting back just the fields that I wanted. And I was really interested in this context annotations because I didn't understand what was going on. And so I replicated all my old collections in V2, and this allows me to then make searches to Postman, to Twitter API using Postman. So if you're not familiar with Postman, I'm going to scroll back up to the top here. I can craft my request here, but one of the things I can do as well as defining authorization, changing these parameters, having control over my headers, I can add what's called test scripts to each of these requests. And this is just JavaScript. It just lets you put JavaScript. There's a bunch of little helper ones over here on the right. If you want help reverse engineering what's possible, you can set variables, you can do different things, check for status codes. I have a script ready that I'm gonna paste in here and just show you, whet your appetite about what you can do. with scripts. So this is fairly simple JavaScript, very crude. I try to keep it as simple as possible. This first line, all it's doing is pulling my response from the Twitter API so that I can work with it here in the JavaScript. What I'm going to end up doing here is I'm going to loop through each tweet, and I'm just going to build me a list of those tweets using only the data that I wanted, that I chose. And then I can either choose to store that, or I can visualize it. So for your response, I can have the JSON response down here. But you can see in my JavaScript, I'm saying, visualize my list. And if you look at the visualizer tab, so let's go ahead and run it. You'll see a list of the tweets here. Now I can make that a little prettier. I could make it a bulleted list. I could filter things out, say if I wanted to put some logic around this and say, you know, if a certain language, maybe filter out certain languages, I could search for content in the text and I could filter those out and just get the list of tweets that I wanted. Now, the second thing I do with that is I actually save those into my environment. So I actually want to save those as part of my environment so that when I run this each time, it's adding them to a storage in my environment. So I'm using my environments to store my keys, as well as I'm using it to store data and actually store that data for usage at other times. And then the last thing I have here in my JavaScript is a test, because I'm actually going to make sure I got a successful response code back from Twitter with this response. Because if, say, my token wasn't working, or Twitter wasn't working, or something went wrong, I want to know about it, because I'm running this collection. I'm running it manually right now, and I can see if it errors out. But I actually want to run them on a schedule as part of a monitor and automate this. And so I want to be able to use Postman test results to tell me whether things failed or were successful. And so this is just a quick look at how you can grab the results, loop through them, filter them, display them for maybe non-developers coming here and look at a certain list, or you can store them for usage later. And then you can access that as part of your environment and grab that data. And you can do that through the Postman API as well. So you could be using Postman to harvest, and then you could be using the Postman API to pull that data and actually put it to use somewhere in your application, seamlessly integrating it. So all of that shows you kind of the journey of my learning experience as part of the Postman COVID-19 response. I learned about V1, I then learned about V2. I was able to get the data that I want, but I was learning more about V2 here. And let's go back to the actual JSON response, because I mentioned context annotations. And so I didn't really, I understand this concept, but I didn't really understand the amount of work that Twitter had put into this. And this was Daniele and I talked going back and forth, and Suhem, about the potential here for COVID research, but wider for researchers. And so rather than me diving into it, I was like, hey, you guys should come explain this, because this is pretty stellar stuff. And that's where they jumped in to help out. And here was from our conversation yesterday.
Cool. Thank you, Ken. I'm Daniele, Developer Relations at Twitter, with the help and the supervision of my teammate and friend, Suhem Parack. We're going to talk about what's going on with the Twitter API labs and plans for the future. But I want to start with a question. What would you do if you needed to get all the tweets about a specific worldwide event? Let's say Mother's Day, for example. It could be COVID, it could be anything else. Let's take this for example. And you needed to get 100% of the tweets across the entire public conversation. You probably use the search API. In this case, you will have to look for specific texts and hashtags and keywords to get an initial set of tweets. But how would you ensure you get all of the relevant tweets? it's likely that the result set might be largely incomplete because the conversation can shift a lot in tone and context. Just like it happened this year with a lot of mothers in the front line who really couldn't celebrate the way they deserved. This is what an incomplete keyword search query will look like in this example. But it doesn't really take into account, someone using a slightly different set of words in a different order, or, what if there's a typo in a tweet? And more importantly, how can you imagine how this would scale to capture the full conversation across all the languages of the world? So even when you have the best tools and resources, scaling search queries in a way that gives accurate results is no everyday job. So we are rebuilding the API platform from the ground up so we can make it easier for developers to find what they're looking for. And we're also adding new features to make sure that this understanding can be leveraged for more use cases and more advanced use cases. So last year, we started previewing this next generation of the Twitter API with a program called the Twitter Developer Labs. This is a free program open to everybody and allows everybody to start using today some of these things we think we're going to ship soon. So this way you can also provide feedback by using the API and tell us what you want that you like the most, and what we should expand on, and things that might best serve your use case. You can find labs in the Postman API network, and we configured this collection to automatically create authentication and to manage authentication for you. So for example, some of these endpoints will require a bearer token, and the collection is configured to automatically get a bearer token created for you and to store it into your environment. But back to our example, how do we search for all tweets about Mother's Day in all languages all across the world? One solution would be to classify each tweet through machine learning and to detect if it's a Mother's Day related tweet or not. But how do we train our data set on all tweets? And how do we make sure that our models are accurate and relevant? Well, you don't, but we do it for you. Because in labs, actually, we embed artificial intelligence directly into the API through context annotations and entity recognition. This means that each tweet can contain annotations to detect what the tweet is actually talking about. And plus, we can extract recognized name entities that are present in the tweet text. So if we're talking about a place or a personality, you're going to have that extracted, regardless of the fact that this entity is being mentioned directly. And this is possible because we constantly run machine learning models against all tweets to better understand the topic of the tweet and to isolate any entities discussed in the tweet. So in the Mother's Day example, even if they're not in the same language, these tweets are about the same topic. It's a holiday called Mother's Day. So we can then start representing things like tweets, not just in the form of keywords, but in the form of entities. And as you see in labs, when you look at these tweets, they all share the same annotations, the one that are on the right-hand side of this slide. And we can use entities to get tweets about the specific context we're looking for. So this way we can go from a search query like this to this, knowing that it covers more than just the language you can speak. This just covers all the tweets about a holiday called Mother's Day in the world. And you can still use keywords, for example, to further refine our search. If you want to exclude or include particular conversation topics, or to further find specific areas of the conversation within this broader and well understood topic. In this example, we want to highlight only non-English tweets. And that's how we use a combination of context and operators. And the real power and the reason this works so well is because named entity recognition is trained by Twitter on tweets, and because it detects the context of a tweet. So let's take this, for example. Tigers will be back in San Francisco playing against the Giants. So this might sound familiar to most of you. You might understand what this tweet is all about. The recognized entities here are exactly the Detroit Tigers and the San Francisco Giants. And notice that we haven't really mentioned their handles. We're just talking about this. Another thing that we notice is that San Francisco is not really an entity in this case. And this is because we're not talking about the city of San Francisco, but we're talking about the team based in San Francisco. Now, I come from Europe and I have a limited understanding of who the Tigers and the Giants are. I know they're a sports team now, but of which sports exactly? And this is the problem with the lack of contextual awareness. But with the new API, we actually embed contextual annotations when you look up tweets. So in this case, if we can also look at the overall context and understand that we're actually talking about baseball. And so those are baseball teams, and specifically those are Major League baseball teams. So those are all information that you can actually get from the tweet payload right now. So you can understand how we're taking a radically different approach for our new API platform. We know developers want to improve the public conversation, but they also feel sometimes they don't have the means to make such a positive impact to it. But our strategy now is two-folded, and this is how we're going to go about the new platform. First, we give developers the tools to better understand the public conversation, and context annotations and entities, all you saw so far, are available right now in the new Twitter API. And second, we also give developers better tools so they can help their users have a better experience online. They can limit the amount of non-content or content that's not relevant they have to see and witness. And this is an example. Everybody should feel safe and comfortable sharing their thoughts on the internet. Sometimes people who tweet might receive replies that are not relevant or off topic or downright toxic. On Twitter, for example, people might find it difficult to prevent these problems. It's not ideal for the platform, and it's not ideal for people using the platform. So last year, we added a way to hide replies to the conversation. People hide replies for many reasons, including to remove comments that are abusive, irrelevant, or distracting. And while many people want the benefit of hiding replies to improve the quality of their conversations, some people receive such a large number of replies that it's actually difficult, if not overwhelming, to do so without help. So even when you have the tools, you might not have the time, energy, or even the emotional fortitude to deal with this. This is where developers can help. And I have to say we're blessed with developers who want to improve the Twitter experience and make it better for anybody. So with their help, we can make Twitter the best place to have meaningful conversations. This is why in labs, you can also find a completely new API. This didn't exist before. It's a completely new API called Hide Replies. With this API, developers can build tools to help people hide replies to their tweets faster, more efficiently, or in circumstances where they normally give up. Again, this is available right now. With this API, you can really, as a developer, increase healthy participation in the public conversation. So a user can delegate hiding reply to an app based on the criteria this app defines with the user. So it will work like this. The user tweets as usual. Then behind the scenes, there's an app that integrates with this API and checks for replies to a tweet. This can even happen in real time because we have real-time delivery of tweets through the API. Then the app can check for one or more criteria. For example, an app can check if the user wants to hide replies containing one or more words. Maybe you have an allow list or a deny list. Or you might want to reply or hide replies coming from specific users. For example, you might want to reply to allow replies only from users who are more than 30 days old. You can also use annotations and entities, as shown before, to keep the conversation relevant. So for each tweet, you can understand the context or the entities mentioned in the tweets. And if those are not relevant to the original conversation, you can just hide the reply. And if so, you just action the reply accordingly. And multiple apps can cooperate to hide different types of reply at the same time. So this is our strategy. By giving developers tools for better understanding and better tools to action their understanding, you can create an advanced ecosystem that really respects and improves everyone's experience online. And like I said, this is what's available now in Twitter Developer Labs. You can also use the new search API that also have context annotation. You can select response field, and there are metrics directly embedded into the tweet payload. This is not new. And coming soon, together with the new developer portal, actually major changes to the Twitter API. We're going to launch the V2 of the Twitter API containing pretty much all of these things and productionized version, and also specialized access levels for academics. We're starting here, and then you'll see that how the vision and our roadmap will expand to have even more of this. But V2 is coming pretty soon. But for now, if you're interested, you can test drive it at t.co/labs. And with that, I'll hand it off to my friend Suhem. Suhem.
Yeah, thanks, Daniele, for the nice introduction about labs and also annotations. Before I start to talk a little bit more about the value of context annotations, I first wanted to thank the Postman team for having us, because Postman is actually one of my favorite tools. I've been using it since the days when it used to be a Chrome extension. So all through my journey of being a software engineer, solutions architect, and now a developer advocate, that's like my go-to tool. So shout out to Ken and his team for an awesome tool that makes life easy for engineers. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit more about context annotations that Daniele spoke about. And then I wanted to showcase the true value of it by comparing it to a scenario where what would you do if you didn't have context annotations, and what are some of the challenges that you might encounter as going through and getting your own entity recognition. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and show you a sample that I have. You guys able to see my screen, right? So in here, I have a sample that I put together that uses the Twitter Developer Labs sample stream endpoint. And then what I'm doing here, so essentially the way that I want to demonstrate this is, first, here is my call that connects to the sample stream endpoint. And then here I'm looking for all tweets that are in English. Okay, and I wanted to do two things. First is, let's take a look at what's returned as part of the payload, specifically for context annotations. And then we look at how we can do this entity detection using a third-party service. Because the way that this works is that if we gave you just the tweet object without any context annotation, generally academic researchers will do their own kind of like topic modeling or their own entity detection, which means writing additional custom code, training your own model, and testing it against that. So that's one approach. The second approach is where people use like a third-party solution. So which is what I'm using in this demo. In this demo, I'm using AWS Comprehend, which is Amazon Web Services, their service that lets you do topic modeling and detect entities. And obviously that also requires you to write custom code, right? So this is an example of that. So here I'm connected to the sample stream endpoint. And here I'm checking that if a tweet is in English, print the tweet, or instead of that, what I'm going to do is go ahead and print just the context annotation. So if I run it, you'll see that you get, as part of every tweet, you're getting certain entities returned here. So you'll see an ID associated with the domain and then with the entity itself, right? So you can see that certain tweets have things like people's names, sports teams, and things like that. So if I do a comparison between what's returned from Twitter directly and what's returned from, for example, a service like AWS. So let's take a look at those. So here I have a sample entity that's returned, or entity extraction returned from this AWS Comprehend. You see there are like some things here. So like, I obviously, the sample tweet that I use is from my favorite football team, the Baltimore Ravens. And so here you see that from that tweet, it was able to detect things like that has the Ravens, which is associated as an organization, Lamar Jackson, the QB, as a person, and things like that. Now let's compare this to what we get directly from Twitter. So here in the new tweet object, you can see that you get the context annotation back. And here you see that it's a little more detailed. You see that it specifically highlights the entities understood to be about NFL, about Lamar Jackson, the person, because you see here the domain ID falls off the category person. And then you have additional things like the Baltimore Ravens and NFL and sports category and things like that. So this really highlights the value that if Twitter didn't make this available through this, you really have two options. One is to write your own custom code that build and train your data and do the topic modeling. And then secondly, use a service like Comprehend, which again, you have to pay for it, and you're writing custom code for it. However, now Twitter is making it so easy for you that instead of using writing any custom code, like in this example, you don't even have to go to write any custom code. You just have your Postman collection. And here, you can use this context operator. So previously in the example of coronavirus, right? If I wanted to get data about coronavirus, I would do like different search terms like COVID or COVID-19 or corona, things like that, right? And then this will get me the data or a certain data about it. But what about data that is about the topic COVID-19, but doesn't use any of these search terms, right? So what about things such as like self-quarantine or stay at home or social distancing? We know that these are conversations about COVID-19, but obviously that means that you're building a huge search query and adding terms one at a time. And even then, when you have like the conversation shifting from certain keywords, generally what developers do is like they'll have a constantly running data pipeline where they keep adding new words. So like first you search for all tweets about COVID, and then in your response that you're getting back, you're going to constantly keep a track of new words that are showing up and their frequencies. And then you build and identify, okay, now this is a new word, stay at home is associated with this. So I'm gonna go ahead and add it here. So all of that requires custom code, obviously. And now with the context operator, we make it much easier for you to get data directly about these topics, right? So the way that we do it is using three things. One is the operator itself. So in your query, this is an example of the recent search, right? And here in the query, I'm using three things. One is the context, which is the operator for getting the context annotation. And then the format, as Daniele pointed out earlier, it takes the domain ID and then the entity ID itself. So this is the one for COVID-19. 123 is for breaking news domain, and then obviously this is for the entity type of COVID-19. And if I go ahead and run this one, you'll see that now it started bringing tweets about COVID-19. So here, if you see in the context annotation, the domain is 123, and then the entity was the one that we used about COVID-19. So now you're getting a lot of tweets about COVID that may not necessarily include the word COVID, corona, COVID-19, things like that, but will still, but contextually will be about COVID-19. So just wanted to point that out, that instead of writing all of this custom code, you can just get the Postman collection, make sure that you use the right the context operator with the right domain and the entity ID itself. So for example, if you wanted tweets about, for example, a different entity, you just basically need the domain ID and the entity ID and just replace those here. And then you should be good to get data about those annotations without having to write any custom code.
Thank you, guys. That's awesome. And I'm so impressed because, like, one of the things in Postman, I see so much, well, just APIs in general, I see so much redundancy. And what is it about us techno people that, well, I'll just build my own vocabulary. I'll do that. I'll do all that machine learning myself and pull it together. And what is it about us that think, I mean, but across all the researchers, like, and you don't even have to pay the AWS bill. You can just tap into it. It's pretty cool, you guys. I'm impressed with where you guys are taking things.
Yep, I'm seeing a lot of like good feedback specifically from researchers, because this used to, like, I'm talking about my own experience. This used to be like, it's actually a big problem for for academics to like track the entire conversation, because you're like, just think about it, you're paying, especially if your data pipeline is in the cloud, then you're like paying costs for that as well. And so really having to like not write custom code, that itself is like refreshing. And then obviously not worrying about a lot of the costs associated with managing your own data pipeline is also a big plus.
Yeah, this is for everybody, like a huge weight lifted off their shoulders. Like a couple of years ago, when I actually first started here, we had a project to basically start understanding how to machine learn, how to start machine learning, and how to, basically annotate tweets with custom models using TensorFlow, Python. And we thought initially it was like very easy and not time consuming at all. It's actually very hard to make it right. I mean, you can start getting your feet wet and understanding how the principles work. But then if you want to productionize that, it's not going to work. And you have to have a methodology in place, and you need to validate that methodology. And we basically encapsulate all this complexity directly into our own API. So you just have all the result of that embedded into the payload you're requesting. So all you have to do is basically just use it, which is great.
And then there's the volume issues. I mean, like, even if you have a plan and strategy for the ML side, like access to the number of tweets that you want to have to train that model well, the volume of storage, that compute, all of that. I mean, you guys are abstracting away all of that. You guys clearly have the best view when it comes to access to tweets and volume of tweets. So yeah, no, it's cool. And so the researcher access part, when is that going to be? When are you guys coming out with that publicly, the separate researcher access?
I think it's later this year. I don't have the exact date with me, but sometime this year, which is going to be a big plus.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are, the nervous system for the world in so many levels. So when that happens, I would love to figure out how to talk about that, because just both public and private sector research, being able to access that. And then it just kind of reflects your guys' stance overall to everything that's going on right now, as far as, hey, we need help making sense of this. Here's the access levels you guys need.
Yeah.
So it's cool, man. I'm stoked. Well, thank you guys. I really encourage you to head over to Twitter Developer Labs and get involved. If you have direct questions, feel free to tweet at us. We're going to be continuing this conversation between their team and our team, trying to figure out, how to best get the word out about what they're building and make sure we're getting that feedback on what's needed. Because the context annotations is extremely powerful stuff when it comes to not just research, but also being able to filter out noise, deal with harassment and abuse, and really keep conversations occurring on Twitter very precise. So Daniele had some really great walkthroughs of that. What we'll do is we'll regroup after this. Maybe we can publish all of this as a video with higher quality audio, and then I'll work with the Twitter team to see what else we can schedule in the future. And we'll make sure we don't have any technical difficulties as we move forward. So anyways, head over to Postman, take a test drive. I definitely recommend, if you want to play with any of the collections that we have on the COVID-19 research, or feel free to tweet at us, or go to the Postman network, and you can use the collections that are available in the Postman network. Twitter's got some in there, but a lot of other APIs that you might be interested in. So head over to postman.com, play around if you're not already a Postman user. So what do you think, team? Do we want to do some Q&A? Am I still going to answer some of the questions? Is there any way in which we can invoke a UI page with Postman? For example, hitting an API, I have some prerequisites to get some data from the UI, and so I need to write a script to invoke the UI. Any solution? So this is a good question. And you can head over to the Postman COVID-19 page, and you'll see a couple of collections that I built after this Twitter research that demonstrate how to do this. I call these Scrapei collections. So basically what they're doing is just pulling a web page, and this web page or UI page, as the question asks, you can pull that via URL and you can authenticate with that. You can even replicate cookies that are used as part of that authentication. So I recommend looking at those scrape API collections. Those don't have authentication, but they do show how you can scrape and grab data from the page itself. So if it's in a table, if it's in any HTML body, you can use a test script in Postman to parse that page and put it to work. So definitely pre-request scripts and test scripts for each request can become pretty powerful. And Postman is primarily a tool for looking behind the scenes of what's going on with APIs, but the web and APIs are the same. So you can really sniff and understand what's going on behind each of the websites that you use and actually pull information and data that you're looking. The two that I have pulled data from CDC and WHO data, but it should give you an introduction to what you're looking for. All right. So is named entity only a feature of V2 API? So I'm assuming you're meaning the Twitter API. So yeah, the NLP stuff, the whole domains around that they're building, and then the annotations that they use, that's all brand new as part of it's available right now. So you can use it right now, but it's part of this V2 Labs experience out of Twitter. And so, yeah, it's part of the main product. It'll be part of the main V2 release when it comes out publicly or is fully available. So I recommend checking it out because you can give feedback and that's I'm really excited to get this put into video because Suhem talks about this. Suhem talks about how you can be doing this on your own with Amazon Web Services, and you can be building your own models, but Twitter's doing it for you. So you should get involved in what Twitter's doing because obviously they have the best access to their data. They have a lot going on. So I recommend getting more involved with Twitter Labs. All right. Do you have an option to tailor the API to get tweets from accounts that we want to track and pull data from? So do we have an option to tailor the API? So, I mean, the API endpoints that exist. So if you're looking to get tweets from accounts, yeah, there's a specific endpoint to pull users' timeline. And so you see the ones I did for county and state health departments show that you could aggregate one or many different accounts, pull all of their data and aggregate it into a single list, and then use that. I have ones for television stations, but yeah, the context annotations really has some interesting ways to not just, you can pull something from one person's account, it'll show context annotations and give you other dimensions that you could possibly pull from other accounts. And so yeah, you can get out all the tweets, all the user data, and you can use the context annotations to kind of expand those accounts that you're tracking and pulling data from. And then you can also, there's the streaming API. So if you're going to be hitting the API hard, I recommend you take a look at the Twitter's streaming options because you can get a larger sampling and more data. All right. Can you share the collection from which you are telling? So yes, you can go to, so I'm gonna pop down the Q&A here for y'all. How many of you guys are left for Q&A here? 629, that's not too bad. Thanks for hanging out for Q&A, guys. Appreciate it. So if you go to COVID-19 APIs, this is our page, our COVID-19 response page. You can scroll here. So look down here. There's some of those scrape APIs where we've really done a lot of work. Here's the two scrape API ones that I talked about. And the Twitter search ones and the county ones, here's the Twitter search one. All you got to do is click here, run in Postman, and you guys got your own version of that collection. Here's the Twitter accounts for the different governments, the health departments. So yeah, we've got a few here that you can grab. There's documentation available to help you get up and running. But then there's a wealth of other APIs for you to use here as well. So yes, we have that collection available. Let me see. Can you share the link to the Scrape API collection? There you are. It's on the homepage. Easy one answered. Can you read the API response bodies of, say, Excel, PDF through Postman? So no, because they're going to be in a binary format that you're not going to be able to view actually in the Postman. Now, say it's Excel, you can do that through Microsoft Office's API, and it'll mount that spreadsheet for you and pull it. Plus, there's quite a few PDF APIs. I don't know any off the top of my head, but there's quite a few that will allow you to send it, hit the API with a PDF URL or a full body of a PDF, and then view those results as HTML or JSON or otherwise. So yeah, you could do that through Postman, but you're going to need more API help there, because you can't directly hit an Excel or a PDF in Postman. Hope that helped. Which time we got here? We got a little bit. We got time for a few more questions, huh? Can we create load tests via Postman? Yes, you can. I would say we don't have any formal performance or load testing as part of Postman, but it's all based upon the number of requests you put into a collection, the types of calls you make, and then if you're running that as a runner or monitor, you can associate data with that. So you can have your tests actually be hitting with different types of data, and be able to basically load it up with data and then test the performance. You get your network data and all your response time as part of the Postman response object. So using your test scripts, you can grab those numbers and save those and benchmark them, and then just hit those APIs with different amounts of data, different numbers of requests, and different orders from different cloud providers in different regions, and you've got the making of a pretty good load testing and performance. I would love to hear more about how you're doing it as you're working on it, because it's we're always looking for interesting community stories about how you can use Postman when it comes to load testing. Can we automate the test cases in Postman? What is Newman? Great question. Can you automate test cases in Postman? So yes, I'm just going to pop open Postman here on the screen and just show you real quick. So every collection that you build over here, so if I have this collection, I can define my requests. I can define tests for each of these requests. And then this entire collection can be run as a monitor. So I can choose to run this on a certain time from certain regions and automate any of those tests that run and their storage of the data and usage of a specific environment. So I'm going to use my Twitter V2 environment, and it's going to use those credentials when running this monitor, and it's going to output into that environment the results of those tests. And so yeah, I can run them on a schedule. I can run them in different cloud regions. I can run them here using a runner if I want to choose and run all my COVID-19 searches. I can run them here. Here's where I can inject that data that I talked about. If I want to do that load testing that the previous person asked about, I can choose my environment. I can set up delays and iterations. And so I can run that here. And then you can also run this in the command line. So Newman is our command line runner. And if you need more information on Newman, it's pretty easy to find. I just recommend Googling it. And it is the open source command line integration that you can run any of these collections as part of your CI/CD process. And we have integrations with Jenkins and Travis CI, Docker, Circle CI. And so, yeah, so we've got the full meal deal covered when it comes to defining your tests as collections, making them have scripts, and then you can run those in several different ways to accomplish whatever you're looking to do as part of your tests. All right, let's do a couple more here. Let's get to 11:50, make the most of this hour. How many people we still got on here? Not bad, we're still at 5:55. Thanks for everyone for hanging out, I appreciate it. Can we use context annotations to classify Twitter content? Let's say I want sports topic only. Oh my God, I wish that video had worked. So yeah, that's basically what Daniele walked through, is a use case with San Francisco Giants and the Tigers, and making sense of that. It'll classify sports. It'll just help you really wade through the noise of some of these topics. More easily find, get at the tweets, but also find related topics, because that whole domain vocabulary that they're building is just super powerful. So yeah, I recommend checking it out. Hopefully we'll get this out as part of a more formal video, and then we can you can learn more about it. What else? Is it possible to save the results in a text or JSON file on my hard disk? So manually, every request, I'm back in Postman here if you want to take a look at the screen. So every request that I run, you have a saved response right here, saved to a file. So yes, that'll go to your desktop. You can do that manually through the interface. Now, if you're running it in automated fashion, running as a runner or a monitor or part of CI/CD, I recommend storing it as part of the results, only what you want as part of your environment. And then you can access that environment as part of the Postman API. So I have a lot of scripts, Postman collections that I'm running and automating, pulling data from different APIs, aggregating as part of environments. And then I have real-time systems that pull the Postman API, grab that data, and do things with it. And then you just schedule and automate things. So yeah, that's so someone just said, I'm talking about automated collections. I hope I answered your question, because automating with monitors, runners, or Newman is how you can automate all of the collections and schedule them and make them work in different ways. So hopefully I'm getting at what you're trying to follow. The thread of everyone here is a little difficult sometimes. Answered that one. Let's get one more, and then I'm gonna call it quits here, you guys. So could you provide some sample scripts that we can use to learn how Postman can be used in different scenarios? Yeah, this is a great, I always start here. So if you, Postman Sandbox, so there's really a lot of reference material here when it comes to scripting. You know what libraries you have accessible for when it comes to Node.js, but really most of the common things you're going to be doing are listed here. Now I know we're working on improving this and coming up with more specific kind of for different types of testing and different types of automation and different types of platforms, but this is kind of your general reference where you should start. And this gives you a lot of stuff. Like say you want to do validation, you can, it's got all the stuff here. The one that I use a lot here is I make API calls from scripts. So this is another way to continue to automate things and have things happen after the fact. So I recommend spending time here. I have this page bookmarked, making it easily available for me to get at things. And if there's anything that you need there, and you can't find, head over to community.postman and you can ask your questions there. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and call it quits for today. Where'd we end up at? Well, I'm just curious number wise in my head. Still got 518. I appreciate y'all hanging out. We're gonna be working with Twitter on a number of other initiatives. We're gonna get them into our Twitch stream, get Arlemy and Joyce working with them. So there's gonna be plenty of other Twitter V2 conversations. And definitely something more on the context annotations and the natural language processing that they're working on. And I appreciate everyone's time. Thanks for coming out.